And a happy January to you all. I hope it's all going well. I know I'm a bit slow on the hardcore content for this month for various reasons, so we might end up calling this month the month of predicting the year ahead and having a little bit of fun with it while I get myself back on track. So, in the spirit of 2019 predictions, you might remember my last video where I, along with Sean and Jonty from the F1 Word and Dan from F1 Reviews, competed against each other to outwit one another through 20 odd questions about the year ahead. Now, at the end of that video, I threw the questions back to you, the audience, with the promise that I'd squish all of your predictions together so that you could act as a fifth competitor against the four of us. So now in this video, I'm going to reveal what you, the audience, predicted through those 20 questions so we can start the scoring process when the year begins. About 3,700 of you took part in this, so thank you so much if you got involved. I did chop out a few people if I detected some nonsense answers. There's still a bit of nonsense left, but not anything that'll throw the average off massively. So let's crack on. I asked what you thought the total number of full safety car periods would be across the whole year. Sean, Dan and Jonty went with about 1 per race on average, whereas I went a little bit more conservative with just 13. You, the audience, went with an average of 15, though the most common answer was actually 17. The highest answer given was 45, so someone really thinks Romain Grosjean is planning to go out with a bang this year. Well, many bangs by the looks of things. Next, we asked of all of the points available across the whole season, how many would be scooped up by the top 3? Last year it was a massive 80%. Were you more optimistic? Well, yes you were. On average you predicted it would drop to 72%, so you're expecting a stronger midfield this year compared to the top 3. Maybe due to questions over the Honda sitting in that Red Bull. Now half of your answers sat somewhere between 70 and 76%. Question 3 asked you to name every driver that will stand on the podium. For us, the human contestants, we would get 1 point for every correct answer and we would lose a point for every incorrect answer. For you, the legion, the crowd, the masses, I'm making a slight adjustment and I will take the X most popular drivers from your answers, where X is the number of drivers that end up on the podium. So if 7 different drivers end up on the podium this year, I will take your top 7 answers. So let's look at those answers. Your top 6 was quite predictably the Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull drivers, but Ricciardo is a very strong 7th, almost challenging Gasly. We then have Perez, Hulkenberg and Raikkonen before tailing off to Magnussen, Stroll and the rest of them. What's interesting is that there is no clear view here over who you think the 4th, 5th, 6th strongest teams are. You've really mixed it up. Next, a complicated question to explain. But we're looking for which driver you think will have the biggest percentage increase in points if we compare the last 10 races of the year to the first 10 races of the year. Decisions were split among the 4 of us, but you, the audience, seem to have decisively chosen Giovinazzi as their improving driver of choice, with Albon and Russell behind. The best way to win this is to have a lackluster first half of the year and really amp it up in the back end, as it were. So if Gio struggles or Sauber really develop their car, you guys could be right. Albon might be more of a gamble if we imagine that Toro Rosso will be getting a barrage of grid penalties in the second half due to constantly chucking their Hondas in the bin. Which driver will get the most driver of the day wins over the whole year? Well, you really only had 2 drivers in mind. Verstappen was the easy victory in your minds, but that boy Leclerc was really the only other driver you thought of. No one else even broke the 200 votes barrier. And now looking at which drivers you think will vacate their seats and leave F1 during or at the end of the year, it's pretty clear you think Kvyat is just keeping that seat warm while Toro Rosso get their junior pipeline in order, which is a crying shame really. After that you think Bottas and Grosjean will have nowhere left to go at the end of the year and Kubica will not be able to keep his place on the grid either. We shall see, F1 fans, we shall see. Personally, I would like to see Bottas and Kubica prove themselves, but that might end up being a tricky task. Now when it comes to which race will have the most retirements, you strongly agree with Sean and me, overwhelmingly voting for Baku. Unsurprisingly, the top 3 choices are all street tracks, with the wildcard races of Australia and Canada following. I can't say I can argue with any of your choices here. I then asked which driver would gain the most positions from lights to flag. The rule here is that I subtract the finishing position from the starting position, so if you lose places in the race, that will be subtracted from the driver's overall score. Retirements would not be counted. And there is a clear favourite here too. Once again, Verstappen is your guy, and I think, as we discussed on the original stream, he's a fast racer in a great car that is likely to take quite a few grid penalties along the way. Now, way behind him, you've picked Ricciardo and Stroll, which is, well, it's interesting. Now, for the first contentious question, I asked which teams would launch with a very different livery to their 2018 race liveries. Now, I said I would include weird launch liveries like the Red Bull camo colours, and I'll have to argue my case for which ones I include when the time comes. But let's have a look at your predictions. Now Haas and Williams lead the way, which is no surprise as they're both having significant sponsorship changes. Fair enough. We then have McLaren and Sauber, which I think is you guys being hopeful. Both teams maybe didn't quite nail their liveries last year, so might have another crack at them this year. McLaren have also got to shove Coca-Cola on there somewhere too. Red Bull come fifth, perhaps throwing another funky launch livery at their car or maybe incorporating Honda into their design. And unsurprisingly, Mercedes and Ferrari bring up the rear. Now Alonso might have left F1, but he's contending in quite a few other motorsports throughout the year, and I asked which of the following he would win. The Le Mans 24 Hour, the WEC title, the Indy 500, and or the Daytona 24 Hour. I'm very sorry I didn't give you a none option, which I know some of you got in touch asking for. The consensus among you seemed to be that he'll win the Le Mans, the WEC, and the Indy 500, as over 50% of you have chosen those options. So I'm locking you down for all three. Not as optimistic as Jonty, but bolder than the rest of us. Now when it comes to Rookie of the Year, there may be some debate at the end of the season as to who the strongest newcomer actually is. But in your eyes, Norris is the guy. I was interested to see Giovinazzi rank higher than Russell, but clearly you doubt the Williams' ability to let Russell shine. Poor Albon though. I'd like to see him show you all. I then asked which team would look the strongest through winter testing, and again there may be some argument here when the time comes, but there isn't much argument among you guys. You are solidly backing Ferrari to come through the winter on top. And goodness knows they need it. Dan and I agree with you, and Sean's gone with Mercedes and Jonty. Well, Jonty's just here to have a good time. In 2018, the driver's title was wrapped up a couple of races early in Mexico. But when will it all be over in 2019? Brazil won in a landslide with you guys, thinking the title would be over with one race left to go. Now interestingly, more of you thought it would end in the US than in Mexico. Would love to know what you were thinking there. Now sadly one team has to finish last and you guys pinned it all on Williams this year. Over 2,000 of you picked Williams to take home the wooden spoon, and I honestly thought the vote would be a little bit more mixed up with some uncertainty going into 2019. Toro Rosso is your second pick with McLaren a distant third. Now interestingly, if you reverse this order, we get an idea of how you think the Constructors' title will end up, and somehow we've got Renault as champions, with Red Bull second, Ferrari third, and Mercedes fourth. Renault, in fact, was the only team that no one picked to come last. Do with that information what you will. As for the number of points Williams would get, you guys went with an average of 13 points. You seemed pretty sure it would be around that area, with half of all predictions falling between 10 and 16 points, and 46 of you choosing 0. I did ask which engine supply would score the highest points on average between the teams they supply. Between the four of us, we chose Ferrari against Mercedes 3-1, and you've basically done the same, with 2,700 of you going for Ferrari and only 700 going for Mercedes. Honda have edged out Renault, interestingly. That'll be something worth keeping an eye on. A classic statistic the media like to keep an eye on through the season is the teammate qualifying head-to-head score. I asked which driver would out-qualify their teammate by the highest margin, and you guys have gone for Verstappen. He's a very popular driver among you this year, isn't he? Any Dutch fans in the audience? Give us a wave in the comments. Hamilton and Raikkonen are a strong second and third here, with a lot of you also thinking Perez will do well over Daddy's lad Stroll. We shall see. You've also predicted pretty resolutely that Verstappen will beat Gasly in qualifying by a ratio of 17-4. Under the umbrella term of the Formula 1.5 champion, I wanted to know who you thought would be the highest ranking driver not from Mercedes, Ferrari or Red Bull. And well, there's really no competition here. 2,600 of you back Ricciardo here, with the remaining drivers getting just a tiny smattering of your love. So Dan better bring it. Almost all of us are counting on it. Except Jonty. Now at this point I did ask you to name an innovation that Liberty Media would announce at some point in the year. Seeing as 3,700 of you filled in your predictions, I can't go through all of them, but I can give you a random smattering from the pile. For example, some of you thought some special camera effects would come on screen when the car accelerated. Quite a few of you went for 3 driver teams. Some of you went for live graphics showing driver biometrics. Quite a few suggested in-camera helmets. Someone thought you'd start having to pay to vote for driver of the day, which I wouldn't necessarily put past Liberty. A couple of you thought there'd be a Formula 1.5 trophy. Someone said a date would be announced when Formula 1 and Formula E would merge. And having watched Formula E, some of you thought attack mode would be brought across to Formula 1. The most common answers, probably by quite a long way sifting through them, is A, that a Dutch Grand Prix would be announced, probably Zandvoort, and a 2 pit stop minimum would be brought in. So if either of those happen, I'll give you the points. Next, I asked how many races would be confirmed for the 2020 season, and you've gone very much for 22. I thought it would be more evenly spread, but no, you definitely think it'll be 22. So it'll be pretty embarrassing for you guys if you get this wrong. And finally, we wanted you to know who you thought would win this quiz out of me, Sean, Jonty and Dan. Us, as the players, very much lean towards Jonty, but you guys, you naive fools, have picked me. And I'm flattered, but my goodness, you guys are doomed. I'm so sorry. Did you not see the bingo I did last year? You can't trust me with this stuff. And that's your lot. That's all 20 questions. That's what you predicted, and let's see if you can, en masse, beat the rest of us. There is again a link in the description under this video to a PDF that contains all of the prediction questions written out and the point value of each answer, so you can play along at home through the year. And very shortly on this channel it'll be time for Chain Bear F1 Bingo 2019. And this year, there's a little bit of a twist. I'll see you shortly.